The data points to the obvious conclusion that colonies that resist Varroa mites keep their mite loads under certain thresholds, and we have tools that allow us to monitor that. So yeah, I kill 300 bees once a month for 3 months versus a whole entire colony. Again, it's not an issue of treatment anymore for me. It's not an issue of, well, why monitor if you're going to not treat, because monitoring means treat. No, that's not true. Monitoring no longer means that you're doing it because you're going to treat. So I decided to come to one of the bee yards and just take a gander. We've had some really cold temperatures for the last several weeks. It is probably about 24, 25 degrees right now, I think. And it is December 8th, 2025. And so there are definitely bees flying around here at the breeder yard, as I call it. And definitely dead bees on the bottom boards. And it's interesting because this colony here has ice on the bottom board, whereas some of these others do not. They have plenty of snow, so not a lot of extra ice melt causing that, as much as it is just moisture dripping, I guess, from the colony, as well as periodic melts, but not enough heat rolling out of that bottom here to really melt the snow from that board. But when you take a look at the temperature, now we've got some ambient temps from the sun causing a heat signature there on the plastic wrap. But if you notice, the temperatures by and large are above freezing in that middle box there and in that handhold. And then also, if I go down to the bottom entrance where there's just a peak, it's above freezing as well. So inside, the air of the colony is definitely cold near the bottom, but the temperatures of the cluster are probably significantly better. It's kind of hard to get a really good reading during the day on clusters with these thermal imagers, but you know, it's enough to satiate your curiosities. But everybody looks like they've got some sort of a signature, if you will. And sometimes colonies don't really reflect a lot of signature like this one here on the end, which is questionable, right? But there's no way to tell where that colony is And the box, if I look to the side, I can't really see any temperature readings because of the insulation. So again, this would be basically, from all intents and purposes, looks like a dead out. But we've got bees flying out of the entrance here, and obviously down on the ground. And if you give them a breath of air, I guess you get a little bit of a buzz. But if you look at the bottom here, again, the temperature inside the box is well above freezing, at least as far as the air is concerned in there, and some of the surfaces on the bottom of the bars. Not sure why that died. Must be too cold. While I'm out here doinking around with the bees, I wanted to set the record straight on my position as far as treatment-free beekeeping is concerned, since there's not a lot of beekeeping happening right now with the winter temperatures. So where is it that I do actually stand? Because the question has been raised in a lot of ways. When you use treatment, or you are not using treatment, or maybe there's a mixture of both. There's a dividing line, there's a camp assignment, badge, if you will, some polarity between the two ideologies, as if there's no overlap between the two. And I know it doesn't really matter. I don't actually really care what people think of my treatment approach, whether I go one way toward treatment or I go another way toward non-treatment or somewhere in the middle. The funny part is it doesn't really matter, because they're not your bees, they're mine. And I've got results to show for what it is that I'm doing. But my position, by and large, is that when I started beekeeping, I wanted to be treatment-free. And I still want to be treatment-free. And I'm not going to give the caveat, but it's not possible, because I don't agree with that. I do believe it's possible. I believe that if you're willing to assume the risk associated with treatment-free beekeeping and the potential for loss to achieve the end result of more resistant colonies, regardless of the mechanism, dude, go for it. I'll support you all day long. The dilemma is that in what I am doing and what I'm hoping to achieve is that there's a replication of what it is that I'm doing, so everyone can be treatment free. Everyone can monitor, and everyone can select, and everyone can reasonably expect some sort of an outcome that their bees will live within a reasonable, predictable circumstance, that they can make nuke sales the next year, or increase the size of their apiary, or count on colonies to raise more queens off the survivor stock, right? You have to have colonies in order to raise survivor stock and raise queens. So how do you do that? How do you reasonably predict that? Or how do you reasonably share those results with other people so they can have it too? So if you're treatment free and you don't care whether your bees live or your bees die, and you're just going to replace them with swarms, and you've got the time and you've got the wherewithal and the impetus to do so, okay, go for it. Replace your colony losses. Spend your time doing that. The time you spend running around chasing swarms, collecting swarms, and that sort of thing, I'm not willing to exchange that time anymore. I'm not willing to run around all over God's creation grabbing swarms. Matter of fact, at this point in time, if it's easy and I could just go pick it off, sure, I'll do that. I've got way too many colonies to manage to run around and collect swarms. But the time that I spend doing that, I could spend monitoring for mites. I could actually take the time that it takes me to go run an hour away, collect a swarm, deal with a customer, answer phone calls, and argue with people over yellow jackets, monitoring for mites. Like, it's a time labor exchange. So why would I not do that? And if at the end of the day I have records that tell me that the mites are lower in a specific colony and that I can breed from that colony because that colony without treatment is keeping the mites low, why would you not do that, right? Like, again, it's fine. You don't want to do that because it's some sort of moral high ground to not monitor for mites because you might treat. Okay, so what? I don't care. Have fun. They're your bees, right? But the data points to the obvious conclusion that colonies that resist Varroa mites keep their mite loads under certain thresholds, and we have tools that allow us to monitor that. So yeah, I kill 300 bees once a month for 3 months versus a whole entire colony. Again, it's not an issue of treatment anymore for me. It's not an issue of, well, why monitor if you're going to not treat, because monitoring means treat. No, that's not true. Monitoring no longer means that you're doing it because you're going to treat. And if we stay in this arbitrary binary definition of monitoring equals treatment, then you're just kind of choosing to be there because the evidence supports so many different conclusions when it comes to monitoring. You can monitor for the purpose and intent of breeding. These are breeder colonies that I'm looking at right now. These have survived 2 years. This is going to be their second winter, entering into their third season. And they were ran as production colonies. So this is where these thermal images can be deceiving, right? Like those colonies are giving me readings. Looks like there's a big signature in the top of that box, which is obviously not ideal. Not much I could do about it at this point. There was definitely plenty of honey in that colony. They have enough. If they decided to move all the way up to the top and screw themselves, then so be it. But you can see there's obviously flight bees leaving the colonies here. These two colonies are probably some of the ones that I covet the most here. Let's take a look at the signatures. So slightly above 32 there. There we go. Yeah. So that's what I want to see. This one's a little more faint, obviously, because they were higher up in the box. We got above freezing, for what that's worth. Just barely. Let's see if we can get a little bit of a better shot there. 33 degrees. But you can see there's a heat signature coming down, radiating on the bottom of those frames. And bees on the bottom board. So we've got life and we've got flight. Cluster sizes to be determined, obviously. These ones definitely got a lot of action going on over here. These are Golden West Queens. All of these had no mite loads, really. More than 3 or 4 mites in the wash, except this one here on the left. It was 12 mites in the last wash I did. And those colonies as well are my stock and breeder queens. Just because there's temperatures now, December 8th, doesn't mean anything. If we get through to Christmas, I'll feel a little bit better about survival here in this yard. And we still got clusters. these all look like they've got life. It's getting darker too, so maybe we'll get a better signature. I only insulated the 3 boxes above the bottom on these colonies with 4 because I wasn't planning on cutting additional pieces of foam outside of my typical configurations, because I don't usually winter in 4 high if I can prevent it. But these ones needed extra food, and I didn't want to break up the clusters because there was so many bees inside these colonies. So I just went ahead and added the extra box. But not all of them have that, so majority have that. The others are 3 high. So I'm going to check the signatures. So as we can see, the heat signatures are greater in the top of these boxes. That's also where most of the thermal mass is with the food that I put in those colonies. It looks like we've got the same issue going on here. Isn't that exciting? They're all chilling up top. So that could be good and that could be bad. What's going on with these ones? They're the 3 highs. These are only 3. So it's the temperature on that box there on the right. And sometimes I have to go around to the back because the colonies will be in the back. See, there's a better signature on the back side because the colonies are in the back of the box or closer to the back of that box. So that's what I want to see. Yeah, the temperatures are definitely different than the other yard. But if they're way up in the top, that would make sense. Oh. That one's got a little bit better signature if we get around the snow there. And you can see the heat of the cluster there. So there's no insulation there between those 2 boxes. You can see the cluster. What's the temperature there? 40 degrees off the side of the box there. The same with these 2. It gets a little higher, but it's probably around the back side. Yeah, that box right there, struggle bus. Temperatures are definitely higher up top, and that's okay. Means the insulation is working. There's higher temperatures up above. And that's also where all the honey is, so that's where the thermal mass is. So I've done everything I could with these colonies, besides treat prophylactically. I've done washes, I've used resistant stock, I've grafted off my own local survivors. All of these colonies in this yard are mine from my bees. And I'd say outside of, like I said, treating prophylactically, I've done everything I could. They've got insulation, they've got food, I've weighed them, I've evaluated the Varroa loads. If they die, maybe it's from viruses from the mites that are in the colony. Maybe there's a circumstance in my beekeeping that I have to, cross a threshold where it doesn't matter how many mites you have, the one mite with the virus is going to kill everybody, but I don't really subscribe to that. I believe that the less mites there are, the less viral load you'll have, the higher likelihood of survival. It's easier to choose phenotypical traits through the monitoring that's accessible to your regular Joe Bob Tumbleweed beekeeper like myself. You don't have to have a lab coat or a degree in anything to do mite washes. So why aren't you? And if you want to, when are you planning to start? And what is your monitoring program going to look like next season? Because while we can't really tell what's going to happen with these colonies here, I can tell you some of them are going to survive. And I'm going to tell you the ones that do survive, that I have mite counts on, that I know kept mite loads low without treatment, are going to be the ones that I raise more stock from. And yeah, breed from the survivors. That's a good policy too, if that's the way you want to do it. But sometimes colonies survive without having done anything. And maybe they just didn't have a lot of mites internally that year. But that doesn't mean that they're resistant stock, and I'm not really interested in those. I want to know so I can make choices.